comes up all too often, so I thought I would say something. So this is just a reminder that people out there are paying attention. If you pull this kind of thing, you are remembered as unreliable, unprofessional. And guess who loses future opportunities? Because when they think about you, they think about that time that you wasted of theirs. The retailers are paying attention. The distributors are paying attention. The industry is paying attention.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 203 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. This is going to be a sort of special, shorter rant edition of the podcast. Now, this podcast is a revised and edited version of a rant that was originally shared to the patron-only feed for patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast, and as such, this episode is sponsored by my awesome patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. So thank you to my awesome patrons. I'm actually going to read off the names of my patrons because I want to fully acknowledge you. Yes, I read your names when you first signed up as a patron, but once more for good measure, shall we? So thank you to my patrons, Roland Denzel, David Perlmutter, Faye White, Jeff Elkins, Connor Whiteley, Kevin Partner, Johanna Rothman, Lindsay Baroker, Kathy Mack, Linda Hill, Chad Boyer, writer, Linda Sterling, Stanley B. Trice, Leanne Beckett, Sherry Dector, Hurst writing as Sherilyn Dector, Ember Casey, Michael Lister, Jan Field, Katie, Mary Jo Rabe, Maddie Dalrymple, Amy Tegan Schubert, Joanna Penn, Jamie Ferguson, Marcel Gagne, Per Steiner K. Houghton, and Julie Strauss. Thank you guys so much. These are the small but powerful list of patrons who are supporting this podcast over on patreon.com. And I did have other patrons who, several people had to leave, financial changes, etc. I do appreciate anyone who has previously sponsored or been a patron of this podcast. Really appreciate you, but I wanted to take some time just to read out the current patrons because this episode is sponsored by my patrons. But thanks to a number of my patrons from that list there for feedback and comments on the original rant in the patron-only audio feed for this podcast, because I appreciated the feedback, and there was a common suggestion that this rant I had shared with my patrons was something that I should likely tweak, revise, remove maybe some of the swear words from, but make it available to all the listeners of this podcast, because this is something that my patrons believed would benefit all authors. And I love the fact that they're thinking about you. I really should have been thinking about you. What I often do is, the patron things are more experimental posts, sort of sharing things. But thank you for my patrons for helping me help all the listeners of this community, because what you're about to hear is an edited and revised version of my original rant. Now, the original rant was I just turned on the mic and just kind of went to town. Now this, that rant, of course, is shared. Again, I've cleaned it up thanks to my patrons and suggestions, because I want you, dear listener, I want you to be able to understand the repercussions of things that you may not be aware is happening quietly and in the background, behind the scenes, but never really spoken about publicly. But it does happen. And it's based on a simple thing that authors do that it's unprofessional and can have a negative impact on you and your long-term perception as an author, as a professional. And basically, this is why I call this podcast the Stark Reflections podcast, is that I want you to have a look at the honesty. I want to share with you in an open way behind the scenes, and that's kind of what this is about. So let's get to that rant, shall we? A lot of retailers work hard to find promotions for authors. No, more specifically, Kobo, Apple Books, and Nook. Those tend to be the major retailers that do a lot of work finding promotions for authors. You see, Amazon doesn't really have to work at it. Their system, very much like Google Play's system, is based mostly on algorithms. And of course, Amazon does have a gigantic market, especially in the US and the UK, and they admittedly have this really great system. And of course, they have built-in tools like Amazon Advertising, plus dozens of other author advocates out there teaching people how to use Amazon Advertising and how to game Amazon's system and all those things related to the algorithm, so that you authors can spend more time focusing on Amazon, spend more money at Amazon, and you can do all this hard work promoting your stuff and your sales on their platform, continuing to feed that beast and maintain exclusivity with Amazon. So Amazon has these systems built in to take your money and to take all your work and energy. and that's one of the self-fulfilling prophecies, of course, with all this work and all this focus on Amazon. And then there's the other places. But these other retailers, specifically Apple, Kobo, and Nook, well, they're born from more traditional book selling. They work hard with manual merchandising because they're working in that traditional way of putting the right books in front of the right customers. There's so much human curation and a lot of planned out promos where a lot of significant work and energy goes into these planned out promos. They spend a lot of time and energy soliciting titles for promotions, and they do that with publishers. They do that directly with authors who publish direct with them. And they do it through distributors, like Smashwords, Draft2Digital, Publish Drive, Streetlib, and others. Now, I worked for Kobo between 2011 and 2017. I was the establishing director of Kobo Writing Life. So I did a lot of that work directly within the Kobo team, working with the merchandising and marketing teams. And now I currently work part-time with Draft2Digital, and I continue to work with retail and library partners to help them curate titles for their ongoing promotions. So this is an activity I've been long engaged with. Heck, when I was a bookseller, I would do that kind of curation, working with sales reps from publishers to figure out what books were going to be featured, purchased in certain quantities and featured and things like that. So this is very, very similar work. This is very traditional work, but this is a lot of the curation that happens to help the right titles get visibility in front of the right customers to, at the end of the day, what everyone wants is to increase sales. So here's where this rant comes into play. We were recently soliciting titles for promotion for one of D2D's retail partners. And the way that these works is that the retailer reaches out to, publishers through the direct publishing teams, through their distribution partners. And they say, okay, we're looking for titles in this theme, in this category, for this date range, August long weekend or Labor Day weekend, or it could be, the entire month of July or whatever it is. And the titles either need to be pre-discounted, like below $4.99 US, or these are titles that we're looking for that are going to have a discount coupon applied. Kobo does a lot of these where they apply a coupon code, so there's no need to change prices or whatever. So however these work, they're looking for a specific number of nominated titles. Now, it might be 50 titles because they're taking 50 from every publisher or distributor. It might be 100, 200, sometimes higher. Sometimes it's a promotion that's exclusively for Kobo Writing Life or Draft2Digital or Smashwords or something like that. Or it could be a Random House promo or whatever. Well, those don't apply to us, indie authors. But they may be taking a specific number of titles. Like I said, 50, 100, 200, sometimes higher. They don't always take all nominated titles. So sometimes they take in the submissions and then they curate them down. So they might have received 1,000 titles in total from all the different sources, and they're going to cut it down to 250 titles. And other times they'll take the curated list. It may be a very small percentage of them. But the whole gist of it is there's a huge amount of manual work and solicitation that goes in to these promotions, these features. Why? Well, because having titles featured in such promotions is a really phenomenal way to gain visibility with retailers, customers, and increase sales. And unlike, paid Amazon ads, they're free. Usually they're free. Sometimes, with some of the promos, they'll do margin shaving. I know Kobo Writing Line, for example, if you submit to a promo through their systems, you earn 10% less because you're paying, only if you sell well. But for the most part, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free. All these people are doing all this work to help you because the retailers and the distributors want you to have these titles featured in promotions to gain visibility with the retailer's right customers to increase sales. Because when you increase your sales, everybody wins. Everybody gets something good. The readers get something awesome. The retailer gets, more money. The distributor gets more money. The author gets more money. Everyone wins. That's why so much work is put into this kind of thing. But doing these promotions, it takes a lot of pre-planning. It takes a lot of hours of labor. It involves, at the retailer end of things, it involves the marketing and web teams and the merchandising teams. And they're all working on these schedules. Usually could be 4 to 6 to 12 weeks in advance. And if they're partnering with a distributor or whatever, the distributor side to solicit these titles means, creating processes on how to find the right authors, the right titles, how to invite them to submit them, how to nominate titles. It means either contacting the authors or having the authors submit to forms that they've created. And then once the data's submitted, it means curating those submissions, going through the lists and validating them, making sure the ISBNs were entered properly, that the titles are actually in the right genres or categories, that the price points are what the retailer expected, that the book's actually live on that retail platform. Now, this sometimes requires going back to the authors and communicating with them and asking for adjustments because, hey, you've submitted this title, but your price schedule is 2 days off. You need to change it, or it's the wrong price point or whatever. Make this tweak so it can be included. So there is sometimes that back and forth involved. But at the end of the day, there's a significant amount of work, a whole ton of hours going on from a whole bunch of different people that goes into this process. And here's what happens that really grinds my gears. It frustrates me and absolutely boggles my mind that authors would even do this. And again, I'm sharing this because I see it way too often. It annoys the heck out of me. So an author fills out this submission form to be included in a promo. It's like, hey, I'd like you to feature this title or these titles. And I know that you're featuring, I acknowledge that you're featuring it at this price point from this date to this date or whatever. So they fill out the form. And I'm not kidding. I've seen 1 or 2 or 3 days after they submitted the title, they delist it from the retailer or all retailers, because we know, Amazon, KDP Select, they want to be exclusive. Most likely, that's usually what you're seeing evidence of, because it's delisted everywhere except that one place. The question that comes to my mind is, what the heck are these authors thinking? Are they that short-sighted that they don't even realize that they just put that title into play? Where downstream you have numerous people going to invest hours of their time looking at where that title can best fit into a promo. If it's been submitted to the retailer, they're looking at which titles will be, featured and called out as hero widgets, and maybe it'll be featured, where's it going to go in the main 5 or 6 titles in the carousel, because that main landing page usually has about 20, 30, 40 titles that are featured, curated by genre, etc. So there's a lot of work that goes into planning these assets once the assets are submitted. But no, the author submits the title and they delist it before the promo is even started. They've given up on that title. They've given up on that retailer before they even gave it a chance. And it's a huge, huge waste of time. And it's a sign to me of an author who's being selfish and completely unprofessional. This is the type of author I never, ever want to work with again. I never want to waste any of my time, not even an ounce of my time, helping, because they obviously can't even properly help themselves. And they obviously can't even recognize that treating other people with dignity and respect is kind of par for the course. It's kind of required in this industry. Yes, for indie authors, it's mostly a digital game. But there are people involved. It's not just gaming the algorithms and the systems. It's working with other people and treating them with dignity and respect. And it's disgusting to me that authors continue to do this. And I know that retailers and other industry professionals, they feel similarly. I've had many discussions with people over the years about this kind of behavior. But of course, nobody's going to say anything because we're all too damn polite. We're too damn professional to say anything about this publicly. And let's face it, we're all so bloody desperate to have your books that we'll bend over backwards to compensate for that unprofessional, fickle behavior of in and out of KDP Select and exclusivity to Amazon. But you can bet that behind the scenes, there's fuming. And if you engage in this kind of behavior, you're being put on a little short list of authors who are recognized as unprofessional and not worthy of wasting time on. Because it's a reminder that the retailer actually has a lot of work to do to set up these promos. They actually have to work with the merchandising team to establish carousels and banners and marketing information. They take some of the titles that they think look best for the promo. They're going to feature those book covers in the email and the blast they send out to customers. So they need all these assets ahead of time. It's not a last minute thing. They just kind of go, hey, I got a title, I'm going to send it out. They need to coordinate amongst multiple publishers and sources and authors. They need to know that the titles submitted are going to actually be in that promo a few weeks later when it runs out. Not that they spent all this time putting it in a promo and, oh, it's gone. What happened to it? Oh, I don't know. No one communicated anything to us. They need the systems and the platforms to be consistent. And yet I continue to see authors who submit to a promo, and then before the promo is even done accepting submissions, they've removed the title from distribution. What the heck are these authors thinking? Or are they even thinking, I wonder? That you waste your time submitting a title to be featured in a promo where other people are going to be wasting hours of their time to validate the data, to get it ready. Because what? Because you don't know how to plan? You can't even think in minimally short, longer-term planning and strategy? I'm not asking you to think about 3 to 5 years out. I'm asking you to think about 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 weeks out. Do you not pay attention? This is completely unacceptable. It's outright unprofessional author behavior. Now, I'm talking about, admittedly, a small percentage of authors who do this, but a big enough percentage of authors because it happens often enough that I want to ensure that you, dear listener, that you're aware of this so you can avoid making that mistake. So you can avoid being one of the idiots who ruins it for the rest of the class, like the anti-vaxxers and the anti-maskers who are ruining the ability to put this pandemic behind us. I want you to understand just how vital this can be for the long-term relationship building that is part of being a professional author. You're taking the time to submit a title to be considered for promotion, and then you pull it out before the dust even settles, before the submission is even cold, before the promotion submission period is even over. I mean, really, do you pay attention to the things you do? Because I'll tell you, the retailers pay attention to these things, and the distributors and all the people who are out there busting their butts to try to find authors promotional space. They're paying attention. If you're not committed to publishing wide, if you're not committed to actually sticking it out till the end of the promo, the long term, that's not even long term, that's short term, then don't waste other people's time asking for help that you're just going to ignore or reject. Seeing this kind of behavior, when people do this, when you make other authors look bad because you're casting a bad name for the indie author community, but the fickleness of the in and out of KDP Select and exclusivity, it's absolutely annoying. It's unacceptable behavior, and it drives me up the wall because if I had any hair, it would drive me to pull it out in giant clumps. Because I've long worked really hard to help authors, to try to prop up their titles and promote them so that they can earn more money, so they can sell more books, so we can have a more robust ecosystem for everyone. so that more people can be successful. And yet this kind of behavior from a small number of individuals is infuriating and frustrating. But I've been dealing with it for years. It's definitely not new. And it's why I'm saying something to you, dear listener. It's why I'm sharing this. Now I understand. I get it. I do get it. I'm an author myself. I understand that there may be legitimate reasons why you have to pull a title after you've submitted it. Perhaps there's something unexpected or unplanned happen between the time you submitted it and having to delist it. Okay, things can happen. But please, for the love of all good things, at least have the courtesy, the professional courtesy of reaching out to the people that you submitted it to and say, hey, I just submitted this title on day X for promo Y. Something came up, whatever that reason was, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to pull it from consideration. I'm sorry about this. I apologize for wasting your time or for the inconvenience. That goes a long way. It's professional, courteous behavior. Remember, you're dealing with other humans. Show them that you acknowledge and respect their time. Yeah, it is a little bit frustrating, admittedly, if people have done work and it's ready to roll and you have to pull out, but it's way more acceptable because it demonstrates your professionalism. You're communicating with them that something has changed. Even if it's last minute, you're at least communicating with them rather than just click a button and just assume that no one's affected downstream. And then this is just sort of the other level when I think about this. So how does this behavior happen? In my mind, it's sort of professionalism operating at two different levels here that I kind of want to poke around at. The first makes me wonder, are you so unprofessional that you don't even keep track of the things you submit to, the promotions you submit to, where your titles are, what the prices are, what you've submitted it to, what are the periods for those promos, even a basic scratching on a cocktail napkin, never mind tracking it on a spreadsheet or anything more complicated. But you really expect to consider yourself a professional author if you don't keep track of where you've submitted titles for promotional consideration? That could be one of the issues. At least I hope it is, because there's some hope to help train and help authors with this sort of thing, because you can say, well, here's a system, here's a way to track things. I'd like it for it to be that, because if it isn't, does that mean that you're so unprofessional that you don't consider other people, other authors, the people you work with in the industry, that everyone else is just tools or cogs in the wheel? You can do whatever you want to. Who cares what they think or do? Because you're so infatuated with the systems and algorithms that you forget that there are real people doing work behind these digital storefronts. I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to just make things up as I go along because I'm completely independent and who cares about anyone else, and I'm not going to consider the time, work, and effort that other people put into helping me. Heck, I'm on my own journey and I'm doing whatever I want, and who cares about you? Come on. We're all in this together. We're all working in this industry together. Whether it's other authors, whether it's retailers, distributors, publishers, editors, cover designers, any of those people that you work with. Give them the common courtesy to treat them with respect and dignity, professional behavior. But that's basically the rant. That's the thing that I wanted to share. Yeah, a little bit more cleaned up, less emotion, less adult language. Well, no adult language in this version. But it's something that's been bothering me for years. But it came up recently. It comes up all too often, so I thought I would say something. So this is just a reminder that people out there are paying attention. If you pull this kind of thing, you are remembered as unreliable, unprofessional. And guess who loses future opportunities? Because when they think about you, they think about that time that you wasted of theirs. The retailers are paying attention. The distributors are paying attention. The industry is paying attention. Other authors are paying attention to your professional or your unprofessional behavior. Let's flip this on its head, because personally, when I see authors behaving with courtesy, with respect, and treating one another as collaborators, when they're trying to help other authors, when they're trying to treat other authors as partners, and they're trying to help promote and share learnings to lift up those other authors, lift up their sales, help them be better, help them do better, help them sell more. These are the authors that I feel really strongly about wanting to help. I want to help them too. These are the authors that I'll bend over backwards for because I see them as kind and courteous and collaborative. But when I see authors behaving in selfish and narcissistic ways, authors who waste other people's times by asking for things and not even following through to accept the things that they've asked for, guess what naughty list those authors get put on? Yeah, and it's hard to get off that list because once you've made that bad impression, it's really, really hard to come off that. Because they'll always see you as that person that wasted their time. Now again, I said I shared a raw and unedited version of this for my patrons, so thanks to them, I cleaned it up and I'm sharing it with you. Because ultimately, dear listener, I want to help you see, I want to help you reflect on the impact of particular behaviors that can happen so that you can avoid that, so you can avoid being marked as unprofessional or unreliable. Because again, that's what this podcast is all about. This podcast is helping you to reflect on the stark reality of writing and publishing, hence Stark Reflections. So I hope you've enjoyed this Stark Reflection. Again, this is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. If you enjoyed this episode or other episodes, feel free to share it with someone that you think would find value in it. You can also leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Those always go a far way towards helping me find new authors out there that I can hopefully help, give them something to reflect on, something to think on about the business of writing and publishing. So thank you, dear listener, for putting up with this rant and for being a listener to the Stark Reflections podcast. Until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.